Good morning, everyone. Let us start the chapter that which we had started in our previous class, and the topic it was Uncle Poser Lives for Work, chapter number 4. Today we are going to learn the same chapter from page number 59, para number 6. Here I am going to start the story. Please listen it and try to understand. What should I want to leave it in the garden? For I don't want a paper in the garden, I want the paper in the train with me. This was the paragraph that I had stopped in my previous class. Here Uncle Podger is commenting to his wife, that is Aunt Podger, that they were desperately searching the newspaper which was missing at the moment, which Uncle Podger desperately needed at that time when he was about to go for his walk early in the morning. The newspaper was not found. That is why every member in the family were busy to search it out, that where it was placed. When Aunt Podger says that you might have left it in the garden, at that moment Uncle Podger says this, that why I will need a newspaper in the garden. I don't need a paper in the garden. I need newspaper in the train to read while I am traveling. This is what he says. Here somebody would explain, what's this? And hand him a paper from somewhere neatly folded. So in the meantime, when such discussion was going on between Aunt Podger and Uncle Podger, someone comes in the middle and hands over a piece of paper and says, what is this? And hand him a paper from somewhere neatly folded. A neatly folded paper is handed over to Uncle Podger. I do wish people would leave my things alone. This is what Uncle Podger says. He would growl, snatching it savagely, so very angrily. He snatches the paper from his hand and says that if people would leave my things alone, if they would not have just touched it, if they would not have used it, misplaced it, that would be better. This is what he meant to say. He would open his bag to put it in, and then glancing at it, he would pause speechless with a sense of injury. So after that, what he would do, he would place the newspaper inside his bag. He would open his bag first and then put it inside it, glancing over to it. He would give a slight glance. He would look towards to it with a very quick glance. He would pause speechless with a sense of injury. Again he would stop for a moment, as if something has again happened, something wrong. What was it? Let us see. What's the matter? My aunt would ask. In the time, after all, the newspaper is also found. Why? Uncle Podger reacts so. Once again he is speechless. He is not talking at all. He is not speaking at all. He looks quite more and more irritated, angry. That is why Aunt Podger asks him, what is the matter now? You have got your paper. The day before yesterday's, he would answer to hurt, even to shout, throwing the paper down upon the table. The newspaper which it has been brought here now at the moment, it is not today's paper. It is the paper day before's paper. That is what he is very angry, and that is why now he shouts to everybody and throws the paper away down the table. This is what it happens. If only sometimes it had been yesterday's it would have been a change, but it was always the day before's yesterday's. If it was only yesterday's paper was also quite acceptable, but the paper is not yesterday's even. It is day before yesterday's paper. How it can happen? How it can be? This is what he was quite very angry, and that is why he behaves so. He would find it for him eventually. As often as not, he was sitting on it. So the reason behind? He would find it for him eventually, for often as not he was sitting on it. Finally, it was found that Uncle Podger was himself sitting over the newspaper. And then he would smile, not genially. Here, genially means in a friendly or cheerful manner. Okay? So finally, at the end, when it was found that the newspaper was nowhere, but he was himself sitting over the newspaper, then how does he react? Then he would smile not genially, but with the weariness that comes to a man who feels that fate has cast his lot. This is what means cast his lot, means forced to share in the activities or fortunes of someone else. So this is what finally it was found, that Uncle Podger had made a mistake by himself, because he had made busy to everybody. Everybody were now busy at that moment to find it out or search it out, the newspaper which was misplaced or missing, what they thought, and every possible they did to find out that newspaper. And at the end, the newspaper which was found, that too was not of the day, it was the day before yesterday's one. And finally when the actual newspaper it was found, and that is also who was sitting over to it, Uncle Podger himself was sitting over to it. And his reaction at that moment was, he was just trying to pass a smile and trying to get an excuse of it, but with the weariness that comes to a man who feels that fate has cast his lot among a band of hopeless fools, all the time right in front of your noses. He would not finish the sentence. He prided himself on his self-control. In this way, now there was no any option left now. There was no any chance at all for Uncle Podger to blame to anybody else at that moment. So because the mistake was of his own, he had committed his own mistake, because of which he was not able to get his newspaper at that right moment. So that is what he behaves, he reacts, and then he now is getting ready to get off for his duty early in the morning. This settled, he would start for the hall, where it was the custom of my aunt Maria to have the children gathered. Now, after that incident was over, newspaper incident was over, it was the daily routine, it was the daily custom of the house that Aunt Maria would always be getting gathered with the children, getting ready for that last hour of the time, that when Uncle Podger was about to leave for his work. This settled, he would start for the hall. It was the time for him to go to the hall, where it was the custom of Aunt Maria to have the children gathered, ready to say goodbye to him. It was all the family members were ready, gathered there in the hall. It was the time for them to say bid goodbye to whom? To Uncle Podger. One of them, of course, was sure to be missing. The moment this was noticed, all the other six, without an instant's hesitation, would scatter with a whoop to find it. Whoop here means a loud cry of joy or excitement. In this way, when all the children were gathered, it was found that one of the child was getting missing. The moment this was noticed, when it was found, it was got, all the other six members without an instant hesitations would scatter, means they also disperse here and there with a whoop. With a whoop means the loud cry of joy and excitement to find it, to find that boy or the child who was missing at the moment. Immediately after they were gone, it would turn up by itself from somewhere quite near, always with the most reasonable explanations for its absence. Thus 5 minutes at least would pass in everybody looking for everybody else, which was enough time to allow my uncle to find his umbrella and lose his hat. Now in this way, when the family members, the other children, were busy to find out that missing child, everybody were searching for him. In that case, with this activity of searching for that child who was missing, almost 5 minutes would have already been passed. More 5 minutes would have been already passed. And at that time, in that particular situation, when everybody were busy, Uncle Podger would be found to be missing his much more other things, like he would be missing his umbrella the first, and then once again he would be losing his hat. This is what, one after another, the incidents it would occur with him before he was about to leave for his job and before he would go for catching the train. Then at last, as the group reassembled in the hall, the drawing room clock would commence to strike 9. In this way, when all the family members, the children, everybody would be gathered, would be assembled in the hall, at that time there would be a sound of the clock. The bell of the clock would be heard, which would indicate that it was already, what was the time? Already it was time 9 o'clock. It would strike 9. It possessed a cold penetration chime that always had the effect of confusing my uncle. In this way, you can well imagine the condition, the expression of Uncle Podger at that time when he was able to realize and notice that the hall clock had already given the time. It had struck 9 o'clock morning. That means it would be a very confusing moment for whom? For Uncle Podger. Now what is going to do the next, because the time is already past, isn't it? That always had the effect of confusing my uncle. In this excitement, he would kiss some of the children twice over, pass by others, forget whom he had kissed and whom he hadn't, and have to given all over again. He used to say he believed that mixed themselves up on purpose. In this way, Uncle Podger, it was his daily custom and routine that whenever he was about to leave early in the morning time for his job to catch the train, everybody, those who had assembled in the hall, the children, all the family members, he used to kiss one by one to show his love and affection towards to them. Now in the meantime, when he was so hurried, it was already the time was over. He would not remember at all to whom he had kissed, he had already kissed, or somebody he had already remembered. In the meantime, he would forgotten to whom he had shown his love or not. This was the usual things that it used to happen with Uncle Podger, because he was in a great hurry at that moment. The time had already passed and the clock had already stricken 9 o'clock. This is a kind of confusing atmosphere that it would be created there in the meantime when Uncle Podger was in such a great hurry. This is a kind of usual happenings. It used to occur in whose house? In Uncle Podger's house with the family members, because of the forgetful nature of Uncle Podger. Usually he used to forget the things, and then the things would happen which is very much confusing for everybody. Because of Uncle Podger, the things would become very confusing for everybody, and the situation would arise very awkward for everybody. This is what it used to happen almost every day in Uncle Podger's house, especially in the morning hours before he was about to leave for his job to catch the train. If things were going too smoothly, the eldest boy would come out with a tale about all the clocks in the houses being 5 minutes slow. This would send my uncle rushing impetuously down to the gate, where he would recollect that he had with him neither his bag nor his umbrella. In this way, somebody would come in front. Things were going so too smoothly. When the things were going very smoothly, with no any kind of obstructions, any kind of disturbances, but still somebody would come in the middle. The eldest boy, that he would come in the middle with tale about that the clocks is in the house being 5 minutes slow. He would come and remind and tell to Uncle Podger that the clock which had already stricken 9 was 5 minutes slow. Then you can well imagine what would be the condition of Uncle Podger in that situation. Already he was late, and that also overall, now the eldest boy is reminding him that the clock is 5 minutes slow. This would send my uncle rushing impatient. That would make Uncle Podger much more like a mad to make it a great rush now, because he was more and more late down to the gate, where he would recollect that he had with him neither his bag nor his umbrella. At that time he would be so hurried, mad in hurriness, that when he would be able to reach up to the gate, that time he would be able to recollect. He was able to understand and recollect and remember that neither it was a bag in his hand nor the umbrella. That would be the condition because of the hurry. Okay, all the children would charge after him, two of them struggling for the umbrella and other surging round the bag. In this way, the children would be again finding out those umbrella and bags by themselves, would rush towards to Uncle Podger and then hand it over to him his bag. One of them would hand over his bag and the other would hand over to him his umbrella. So this is what it was found to be happening so over there in that situation. All the children round would charge in with two of them struggling for the umbrella and the other surging round the bag. And when they returned, we would discover on the hall table the most important thing that he had forgotten and wondered that he would say when he came home. And when the children would come back, when the family members would come back once again in the hall, at that time, what would they discover on the table on the hall? On the hall table, the most important thing that he had forgotten and wondered what he would say when he come back. Now they find out, they discover that the most important part of his thing he had forgotten at that time on the table of dining of that hall in the house. And what it was? Definitely the newspaper. And at that time they thought, the family members thought, that what would Uncle Podger would be telling when he would come back from his duty, from his job, back to home, and what would be his reaction, what would he respond, what would he tell to the family members. This would be a kind of question to everybody's mind at that time, when they discover that the most important part of his journey, his most important part of his things which he would carry, had already forgotten. That is the newspaper, which was his most important article to carry, that only it was forgotten. This is what we come to know here, children, about Uncle Podger's forgetful nature, and because of that the various problems, the awkward situations, difficulties, problems that family members even sometimes face, and because of which everybody were made to be very busy, and they were also found to be very busy to find out those things which Uncle Podger had forgotten, and they finally helped him to find it out and make him to get ready to go to his duty in office. That is what we have come to learn here in this chapter regarding Uncle Podger's nature and how he lived his life, what were the children's reaction, what was his reaction. Everything is so nicely here described in the story. I think you might have understood the story very well. If so, it's good. So we are going to stop the chapter here itself, because the chapter is over. So next day we will be performing the remaining exercise and grammar exercises, as well as the other question answer works. So let's stop here for today. So thank you so much. Take care.